Yeah, and I think the evolution of TwilioQuest as a product as well has been awesome. Like I remember attending a TwilioQuest and Tea Party event, which for those that don't know is you come together in real life with a Twilion, you get which is a name for Twilio employee, then you kind of work through the TwilioQuest things together. So I took part TwilioQuest 3, which is technically what the standalone game is. Yeah. So it used to be, still a really cool website where you could build up your avatar, but yeah, you work through things. But now it's a game with a soundtrack so awesome, it's even got a SoundCloud page. What more can you ask for? Yeah, I think one of the sort of, when it comes to sort of education, one of the words that I hate the most is easy.
Oh yeah.
If the term isn't easy, a lot of the time when we say easy, what it should be is low barrier to entry, because easy is subjective.
Yes.
And as someone who openly is battled with imposter syndrome, which is the reason why I'm not even a professional developer anymore, I'm a tester. Like for me, when someone tells you that something's easy and then you either struggle to understand it or struggle to make it work, you feel like a failure. So yeah, I hate the word easy.
Same.
You can call something easy once you've done it and go, oh, that was easy. But don't ever tell someone else when you're trying to teach them something that something's easy, because it just makes them feel bad.
Yeah, I think it's all about usage. I think you're absolutely right. I think easy is something that we can only apply to ourselves. We have no business applying something like that to other people. I feel that way about the word deserves. I hate the word deserves when it's just used arbitrarily. I think you should only use the word deserves when you're talking about something you have decided to grant to another human being, because you can make that call. I can say, Luce, you deserve to be on my stream. Ta-da! I've just proven that is true because I can make it true. Ta-da! That works. But especially as somebody who has challenges in this world, as an autistic person, as a person with disabilities, it can be really exhausting to hear people tell you about all of these things that you deserve that neither you nor they can give you. Yeah. And similarly, if you're struggling to take on new skills and new knowledge, it is exactly the opposite of helpful to be told that it is super easy.
Yes. Yeah, no, I hate the word easy. No.
It's just not helpful. It's just not helpful unless you're trying to shut people down. I guess if that's your goal, it can be helpful in that way.
Oh, I was going to say one thing I've liked a lot about the pandemic and having all remote conferences is the quality of recordings for the amateur conferences has gone up so much. So I ran what I would call an amateur conference where we basically did the AV ourselves, and the quality was not great. For the recorded talks, it could have been a lot better, but that wasn't where we put our budget. But now, since everybody is sort of on equal footing and people have invested in cameras and mics, and if they record their talks, they see how it is and they can do it again and improve it and get their audio better. The quality is so much better. I'm so happy about that. Especially audio. If I can't hear the speaker, I can't understand what's going on. And there are so many conferences where I would click on the video on YouTube and the audio level was so low and so distorted that it's not even worth watching.
Anybody who knows me will be 100% unsurprised by what I'm about to say. I like to hold up the Strange Loop as a great example of a conference that has gone all in on this idea of diversity grants. And they are my standard for what scholarship opportunities in the tech space can be. And that's one of the first TAP conferences I ever got to attend because of their grant program. And it was before I actually had access to healthcare. So it was when I was far less mobile than I am right now and in a lot more pain. And my application to that program was full of, I will totally understand if this is too much trouble. I will totally understand if this cannot be accommodated. I will totally understand if I am not at all the kind of human you are looking for this program. And I got a response back from the person who was at that time coordinating the program. And the response was, could you please unpack for me more specifically what your limitations and experience are? Because we want to make sure that you have all of the accommodations that you need to fully enjoy and take part in this conference. And we're talking at that point in my life, I was having to take lay down breaks at least once an hour to allow my spine to recover so that I could exist in the world at all. Like we're talking like I was more disabled than most people are willing to accept as even a thing that humans can be. And they hooked me up. They made sure that I had a driver who picked me up from the airport, who took me to the hotel, who picked me up at the hotel and took me to the venue, who picked me up at the venue and took me to like seriously to like events to between the venue and the hotel. Like they made sure that I was in the hotel with the speakers and like the primary organizers and stuff. They made sure I was at. They even gave me a green room backstage so that I would have a private place to lay down if I got tired of being underfoot. Like, wow. And even then, even with all of that, it wasn't perfect because the world is just not set up to accommodate disabled people. Like 1 year they learned when I got there that the chairlift in the opera house was broken because nobody had bothered to test that chairlift in who knows how long. And like the organizers went to bat for me, but there was nothing that they could do to fix it that late in the game. So instead they hooked me up with like the staff elevators and like the back rooms and stuff. So the commitment is just so over the top. And so over the years, so that was just my first year there. And I've gone back every year and not always on the diversity grant program. I got that amazing experience of starting off in the diversity grant program and then becoming a volunteer that helped out with the diversity grant program and then eventually becoming a sponsor through my work at Twilio. And it's just been so amazing to get to watch their commitment change, but not diminish over time. And they have always been committed to bringing as many people through that diversity grant program as possible to the point of going out and fundraising for more sponsors to make sure that everybody that applies to that program that should get an opportunity to attend gets to attend. And I just love that commitment because it's not surface level. It is the very opposite of surface level. It is down to the core of what they are going for with this event. And I can't possibly explain to you how much better of an event that creates because now it is like my reunion of amazing humans. Like I can't wait to go see people again and meet people for the first time at this event because of the event culture that kind of commitment creates. Being able-bodied, being healthy and able-bodied, this is always a temporary experience. Nobody lives their entire life healthy and able-bodied. That is not a thing. Like absolutely, everybody will experience disability. So we have a disability ERG employee resource group in Twilio, and I'm on that team. And we got to make one of the cool things about Twilio is they facilitate ERGs making like little educational shorts that they play at the all hands because each ERG is kind of representative of one or more communities. And so that's a really cool platform. And so we recently did our first one for the disability ERG. And you've only got 2 minutes. You try and like hit something important and hit it good. And what we decided to hit up was the fact that like, everybody is going to experience disability. Disability is a much broader idea than most people realize. And the example that we were situationally perfectly prepared to give is like, hey, have you experienced anxiety in the last year? I bet you have. Then congratulations, you've experienced a disability. Like everybody who has experienced like the crushing weight of these multiple like crises that we have been navigating over this last year. Welcome to the disability community. You now know what it is like to be hindered by things outside of your control. And I think I think it's important to like humanize and normalize those experiences because we're all going to go through them at various points in our life. And they don't have to be life ending, world ending, as long as we can just like be there for each other and acknowledge that this is just part of the human experience.
Yeah, and I think touching on what you said about, anxiety, I think the other thing as well is to remember that disability isn't always visible. So you can have really, really short-term visibility, like holding a child with one hand. So then there's things you can't do because you've only got one hand, but then you put them down, 2 hands back. But like you said, there's anxiety, there's depression, there's, all sorts of spectrum of things that just make it harder. I'm lucky that I don't really suffer from anxiety in the traditional sense. But then a few years ago, I was mugged and not violent. It was fine. It was just my phone was snatched out my hand in broad daylight.
It doesn't have to have been violent to not be fine.
Oh, yeah. It was more before people worried about me. I'm all right. But because it was in broad daylight during like it was but like 5:30 p.m. on like a summer afternoon, you don't expect that kind of thing to happen when it's broad daylight. So from for a long time afterwards, I was very, very paranoid whenever I walked down the street alone, even in broad daylight. And it was starting to get better, but then the pandemic's hit. And I've gone out so infrequently now that when I go out, I find myself getting quite edgy, or it's just very, very draining because I'm constantly on guard of like who's around. Because literally it was just someone that came up, tapped my shoulder, grabbed my phone and ran. But it was like, sudden invasion of my space at a time when, quite frankly, I thought I was safe because it was daytime.
Yep. And I think that's an excellent point, which is that disability isn't necessarily something you were born with. Mental health issues isn't necessarily something you're born with. And it's not necessarily like an injury or a sickness. Sometimes it's just a life event that happens to you. For example, before the pandemic, the example that I would always use was grief. If you've ever mourned someone that you had a strong emotional attachment to, then you've experienced disability, because grief, while completely natural and good and part of everyone's emotional journey through life, it's also disabling. Like, both of these things can be true at the same time. Like, pregnancy is another one. Like, human beings would have a really hard time if we were unwilling to accommodate pregnancy, but it is absolutely disabling while it is happening. And actually for quite some time afterwards. Like, disability is something that is so incredibly normal. And it's really sad that we do ourselves as Team Human a disservice by not being willing to acknowledge that and plan for that, to accommodate that, instead of accommodating some imagined superhuman individual, which has never and will never exist.
Obviously, you don't see them around as much anymore because a lot of them are more retired. But when you come across the developers who are so old school, they remember the days when the internet wasn't a thing and they had to look things up in books. And I'm like, how did you stay sane?
Well, I was awake and aware during that transition, where basically if somebody wrote code for a living, their cubicle was also a library. And it basically just kept the technologists much more narrowly focused. Like, if I had to do that, I could do that. But instead of being able to say, if it's on the web, I can figure out how to make it, I would have to say, okay, this is the programming language that I know. These are the skills that I have mastered. Like, it would be much more like probably other industries.
Yeah, I think I always wonder if I could go back then, like you're saying, to be much more focused because you can only read books, whether I'd still be in the career I'm in. Because one of the things that I love in the internet makes it easier that we take for granted, just the access to information. So we can just switch languages, frameworks, projects, whatever we feel like, just because.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. Like, thank goodness that the internet is a thing, because between all of the years that I spent basically confined to my bed because I had no access to healthcare and I had a deteriorating spinal condition, I don't know that I would have been able to entertain myself or make any money if it weren't for being able to bounce all over the place with ADHD brain and still be accomplishing something useful by making web things.
Oh God.
So one of the things that I have done since I didn't find the developer community until I was like 30, and I experienced so much of a professional life incredibly hindered by that lack of community. I did the thing that you do if you're me, which is immediately made it my mission in life to make sure nobody else had that experience. And so, like, when people say, hey, I know somebody who's trying to get into tech, can I hook them up with you? I always say yes. And I will stop saying yes if I get too many asks, just to be clear. But so far, I've been able to continuously say yes. And so one of the humans that I'm talking to now, because generally it's people who are doing the self-taught route, because that's the route that I went. So, like, that's what
again, it's empathy. Yeah.
And this person reached out to me, like, this is like after several months of like going back and forth with them. they had found like an online educational course that spoke to them. That's one of the things that I told them: find one that like you find easy to understand, because that's what's going to help you through. It doesn't matter how you learn, just whatever works for you. And they'd found one that really spoke to them in a way that, but they were like, but then, like, after I go through a lesson, I can't seem to immediately use what I've learned without looking it up or rewatching the video. And I'm like, They actually were like doubting whether or not they could be a developer because when they completed a lesson, they hadn't absorbed the lesson sufficiently to immediately use the tech thing that they had learned without looking at how to use it or rewatching.
Could you imagine what the developer community would look like if we weren't allowed to Google all the things that we forget?
Exactly. So like I broke down for this human being. Like I was actually getting ready to head into surgery. So I'm like, more later, but just so you know, looking things up, good. Rewatching tutorial, good. All developers do this thing. More later, going into surgery. Bye.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, like you say, it's just about finding kind of a teaching style as well that works for you. Because so sometimes people work better from posts. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people work better from videos. Mm-hmm. Like I was trying to do something on stream yesterday with Fetch and JavaScript, which I don't know very well. But the website blog I'm trying to put it in is a Next.js repo, so it's got React under the hood. So there's all these extra layers that make it more difficult. And I still not be able to do what I wanted to do, but I've read blog posts, I've read like forum answers, I've read videos, still not got it to work yet. But yeah, sometimes you just have to be open about the fact that, yeah, all the best developers are the ones that just know how to Google.
Yeah. When like after I was sufficiently recovered to make words again, I followed up and unpacked my own experience, which is basically if I understand something well enough that I can look up how to do it in 5 seconds, I am an expert at that thing.
Yes. Yeah. Have you ever heard of the Pac-Man rule?
Yes, I love the Pac-Man rule. The Pac-Man rule is part of like my introduction to every event that I ever hosted live. How about if you tell us about the Pac-Man rule?
Yeah. So the Pac-Man rule is this idea that your group of people, when you're standing around at a conference, should always be the Pac-Man shape like that. So there's always a gap for other people to join you. And then as someone joins you, you adjust. So there's always a space for someone else to join. Because if you see a closed circle, where do you fit in that closed circle? You just stand on the outside looking in, feeling excluded. Whereas if there's always a space, there's always a gap for you to just join in. And it's almost like an open door principle of the door is open, come on in.
Robertables, you'd never heard of the Pac-Man rule. This is why I include it in the intro of every event that I ever host, and in many of the talks that I give, because like you get to be part of today's lucky 10,000. Every day, 10,000 people learn for the first time something that a lot of people think everybody knows. And today you are part of our lucky 10,000 learning about the Pac-Man rule, which is very, very exciting. It is such a useful tool in navigating events. It's part of my toolkit of social skills that every autist should know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there who'll do it subconsciously without realizing of always keeping the circle open. But it's just something to be mindful of because like I've been to things non-tech event related, but I've been to places where people have accidentally closed up the circle and I've been on the outside and I've just lost interest in the event and gone home. You don't realize the power of just leaving a gap that invites people to join you.
I'm like half of the stuff that I'm surrounded by is still new stuff that I am learning. Like
there we go. That's better. Slightly more warm.
This picture behind me is absolutely a proof of concept because I had to figure out this green screen that I own now.
I mean, I know that you can see around it, but in terms of the actual green screen, it is the perfect light. Look at it. Picture's crystal clear. You can see the edges. It's from a green screen perspective, good job. That's worked out well.
Now, if I can just figure out how to like focus the camera down so you don't see past the edges.
Yeah, it depends what camera you've got. But I mean, you've got, Chef Brent. He'll help you out. He knows everything.
I own this camera. I own a Sony A6100 because I know Chef Brent and he told me things. And so I got the things that he told me to get. And now I am learning them.
Yeah. So, I think he's Heck Brent on Twitch now, HECC. But yeah, if you don't follow him already, but you want to learn about like streaming setup and advice, he is the exactly right person to follow. Because if you've ever watched any of the other Twilio streams or you've seen the like Signal and stuff, he's the producer for it behind the scenes. So he is a knowledgeable man when it comes to these things. Yeah, I use analogies quite a lot when I'm teaching things because you just try and like relate it to what people know because it's just easier when you can understand like concepts.
Yeah, one of the ways that I like to unpack education barriers for people that aren't really familiar with that is this great story that I got from my oldest sister when she was going through getting her electrical engineering degree in Texas in the 80s. So she was going through and she was in this class that she needed to graduate. That was all about, I don't know, something electrical engineering because that was the major. And she was in this, it was this massive class and she was the only femme human in the class, which was already intimidating. And then they had their big like test. That's like the giant 30% of their grade or whatever, because I don't know, people think that's a good idea. And then like, there weren't a lot of questions on it, but and one of the big meaty point questions was all about it was all about how lawnmower works, as if that was the most approachable metaphor in the world. And I can totally see how for a demographic of human beings that would be a very approachable metaphor. Yeah. However, not just because she's a femme human, but also because like one time my clumsy dad ran over his toe with a lawnmower. And after that, none of the kids were ever allowed to touch the lawnmower because he ran over his toe. And, you know, it's a thing that happens. But like also just because that's not part of the Texas femme human domain, it was just not an easily approachable concept. And so she ended up having a very different experience. And that was just one example. She said it was like the whole class was like that. All of the metaphors that came up were just assuming a life experience that she simply did not have. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to grapple with, that something that's super obvious for you isn't necessarily super obvious for everyone else, and to be mindful of that.
I really like the TwilioQuest team now. I remember it must have been last year now. I'm sure it was during lockdown. I was streaming TwilioQuest, but I came across an issue in the game, and if you've got, you can always share the link in chat. But I think they've got a Discord now. But there was, at the time, it was the TwilioQuest Slack that was active, and I hopped in there and said, "Oh, you know, we're all convinced that my code is completely right, but it's not completing the mission." So one of the engineering team actually came into the chat for my stream, watched what was happening, and then messaged me privately and taught me a secret workaround just to get past the problem while they looked into it. But I just thought that was super cool that the team are that kind of out there in the community.
I mean, I think some of the obvious changes that I'm really hoping we hold on to are the ways in which this has given access to people that didn't previously have access to stuff. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
As a member of the disability community, I can't tell you how many of us have been told again and again and again that jobs can't be remote when
I hate that attitude.
Obviously they can be. And that's been proven. That's been rolled out now. So I'm really hoping that some of those changes that have just needed to roll out that benefit a whole lot of human beings, just that we can keep them. Also with educational things being made available online, not just the disability community, but also people that don't necessarily have the funds to access the education that they would most benefit from. I love that stuff has gotten more accessible. So even though I know that the in-person element for all sorts of educational experiences is profoundly beneficial, it would be nice if we could hold on to this other avenue of presenting content so that more people can have it. Team Human, you know, I'm
yeah, I'd agree with that. You know, there's events have gone on, you know, whether it's like Microsoft events or Twilio events or other things where you can go, but you have to pay yourself to get there. And one of the things that's changed with the pandemic is that they've gone virtual. And so, you know, so many of us that can't just suddenly jump on an airplane and go to a big country somewhere. So, you know, so many people can go. And even those that it's not just about money, but just access to these things. Yeah, I just love the fact that all these people have hopefully, you know, discovered learning and learned all these new skills during all of this that they can just carry on with.
Now, one thing I will throw out there, just in case anybody who has any sort of power in this area is listening, not that will happen, but whatever, I'll shoot my shot. There really is a benefit from like scholarship programs that actually bring people to these events. And before the pandemic, that's something that I did a lot of work on in the tech community that I absolutely organizers, I will be banging on your doors again as soon as the plague is wrapped up, because there is absolutely an element of breaking down barriers that only happens when you bring people all the way into an exclusive space like a tech conference. And I'm talking about like networking opportunities, friendship opportunities, job opportunities, and just the culture, the environment that you let people be around can be absolutely transformative for people in a way that like just accessing the stream of the just raw technical content is not. So although I am 100% in favor of keeping that streaming option available so that it democratizes the knowledge and just makes it more accessible to more people, I'm also still going to be banging on your organizer doors for y'all that put on events to keep your scholarship programs alive and to keep them focused on bringing those marginalized humans, those people from marginalized communities into those exclusive spaces, because that has magic to it that the virtual experience will never be able to fully.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just about getting the balance right. There's always going to be a place for bringing people together, but then don't go solely for the charging funded on in-person events that then exclude other people, because scholarship programs fantastic and bring people together, but sadly there's never enough money to bring together everybody who might be eligible for a scholarship program. So it's just about looking at the events and deciding kind of a balance of kind of cost versus benefit.
Absolutely.
That sounds so businessy.